But you're not an asshole YouTuber.
Oh, fuck! I got confused.
Yeah.
I saw a red curtain. I thought we were that one prick. What's his name?
There's so many pricks out there.
I can't remember his fucking name. Chris Stuckmann. I know him, you know him. The guy's been on YouTube for nearly a decade and a half at this point. So I feel many are aware of his presence, especially those who seek out movie-related content. There's a chance you've seen one of his reviews at some point, because much like Jeremy Johns, he was one of the guys who got into the YouTube movie review scene very early on.
Fuzzy dogs. Bleed.
He basically reviewed nearly every movie the weekend they released, driving a lot of traffic and viewers to his channel. Hell, that's how I found him way back in like 2012 or 2013. And tell me if you guys remember this. If not, it's going to show how old I am. But for a brief moment, it became kind of a fun trend to compare Chris Stuckmann's review to Jeremy Johns' review when a new movie hit theaters, just to see how they would rate it. It sounds a bit weird, I know, but you really had to be there. But I'm not here to give you his backstory. Odds are you know who he is, because why else would we click on the video? What I want to talk about is much more recent, mainly the past 4 years or so. You see, unlike several of his colleagues that are in the YouTube movie review sphere, Stuckmann had genuine desire to make films. Not like short films for YouTube, but legitimate films backed by a production company. You see, he tried for a while to get something greenlit, and he mentioned before that he submitted several scripts that were rejected, and how he's talked to several people in the industry. So behind the scenes, he was making genuine efforts to get into the film industry. Well, after several years of trying, he finally got a film greenlit and picked up by a production studio called Paper Street Pictures. But let's put a pin in this for now, because what I want to talk about first is his content leading up to this announcement, and how I believe that his first feature film, Shelby Oaks, will greatly determine his career moving forward. In short, this could make or break his career. I'm just being hyperbolic and dramatic, but yeah, this is very important. So let's just go ahead and get into it.
So I'm gonna do this in an entertaining way to reduce the fact that you think I'm gay.
So where to start? I say it was July of 2021. Two very important videos were posted then. The first one was Chris Stuckmann revealing that he will be directing a movie. He revealed information about it and how excited he was to do it. But just 12 days later, he made another video, which is the one I want to talk about. It's called Moving Forward. And in this video, he basically said that he wanted his channel to be more about film celebration rather than reviews and critiques, as well as having some more general movie discussions. And as such, he wouldn't be rating movies anymore. Instead, just talking about them. Remember, this came right on the heels of announcing that he will now be directing a movie. So I think many people could read between the lines when he made this announcement. Stuckmann wanted to work in Hollywood and make movies. So he started pulling back a lot of his criticism when quote-unquote reviewing a movie, as a way to not burn bridges, because now it's very likely that he would run into the writer or director or producer or studio while trying to navigate his way into Hollywood. That's what it felt like to some people when they saw this video, and as time went on, that's basically what happened. It reflected in his content heavily. His reviews didn't feel like a real review because of the lack of criticism, and most of the complaints that he did have were pretty soft in comparison to how he used to critique film. Now, I'll be real with you. I'm in my 30s, and over the last 2 or 3 years, I've lightened and eased up on things that used to bother me about movies. I might still be a bit of a critical prick when compared to most people, but in general, I've lightened up when I realize some things just aren't that serious or worth getting heated about. So I do in part see Stuckmann just getting older and changing his mindset. Remember, he's 37 right now. He's been posting videos for 15 years, making him in his early 20s when he started doing this. So I don't think there's any doubt that he kind of just eased up over time after doing it for so long. However, the timing is pretty convenient. He announced that he's making a movie, then he announces that he's going to change the direction of his channel, and then all of his criticisms basically disappeared. It seemed like he didn't really have a bad thing to say about almost any movie he watched. He said he wanted his channel to be more about film celebration and discussion, but the issue was, he was still marketing and pushing these videos as reviews. So these reviews felt less like reviews and more like a list of things that happened in the movie that he liked, as well as a list of people who made it. It got stale as fuck is what I'm saying, and in general felt very bland and corporate. Like he didn't want to step on anyone's toes in fear of running into them in the future. And I know people have mentioned that even prior to this, in the late 2010s, he did stop making his worst movies of the year list, as well as stopping his hilarity reviews. So it does kind of seem like he was already pulling back anyway, and maybe he did just kind of get tired of dunking on bad movies. At least that's kind of what it seems like, but when you look at the bigger picture, I don't think it comes across that way, because that was in the late 2010s, only a few years before he announced that he was directing a film, which to me suggests that he was very clearly trying to get into the industry. So I think he pulled back on these bad list videos and these hilarity reviews as a way to not burn any bridges before he got to Hollywood. Let's talk about another key moment from this video. Later on, he says this.
Still going to talk about movies. What I'm not going to do anymore is trash filmmakers. And I know that for some people that's going to be a disappointment. And I also know that that will probably cost me some views. But I just don't enjoy it anymore. I don't enjoy talking negatively about film. it was hard to make amateur films as a kid, and I knew that. But it's very difficult to make them professionally as an adult as well.
So my response is this. Yes, making a movie is hard, but just because it's hard doesn't mean it's free of criticism. And that's one reason why it's important to call something out when it doesn't work and praise it when it does. You can be fair and balanced, and of course, some things that bother one person might not bother another. But constructive criticism is better than no criticism. Just endlessly praising somebody doesn't make them better. So Chris was stuck in an odd position where he clearly was pulling back on YouTube because he wanted to be a filmmaker, but he really couldn't because this was his main source of income. Some people have asked if he's so focused on making movies, why doesn't he just quit YouTube and not worry about it? That's why. And I don't blame him. That's a very big revenue stream, so why would you want to cut that off? But as time went on, the more he posted, the more his credibility slowly dwindled. Don't get me wrong, his channel is far from dead. He's built up a pretty solid following over the years, so most of the videos will still do decent overall. But over the years, the videos have felt very weird to watch because it's very clearly a guy who wants to be a filmmaker, quote unquote, reviewing movies. It's really hard to call these reviews if I'm being honest. So what's his opinion really worth? It's almost like Chris forgot that you can review and talk about a movie that someone made without having to quote unquote trash them. Seriously, constructive criticism is a thing, so it's just very odd that that's his big reasoning. Ironically, he would stick true to a lot of things he said in this very video when only a few short years later, he made a non-review that got a lot of attention.
You bet your damn asses I know about I Grew Up With. I put it in all my videos now to fuck with you.
Madam Web. This is when Chris's credibility really took a hit from people outside of his subscribers and following, and really shined a spotlight on him, and just highlighted what a lot of people were starting to say for some time about Chris Stuckmann, except it was getting exposed to a whole new group of people. This drama was covered to death back when it happened, but here's the long and short of it. Basically, Madam Web came out, and it sucked. Big surprise, I know. The internet took turns tearing it apart, but Chris Stuckmann decided to take a different approach. He made a video not reviewing the movie, because in his own words, he doesn't want to tear down filmmakers. Instead, he made a video talking about how hard it must have been to work under such a big studio like Sony, and how the filmmakers were put under a lot of pressure. He was basically white knighting for the writer and directors and the stars, but also low-key saying that the movie was bad without having to say that the movie was bad, which kind of made the whole video kind of funny when you think about it. But this was him sticking true to his word that he wasn't going to talk bad about movies. This ended up blowing up in his face. This came across as someone just deflecting and making excuses as to why a movie is bad. But it was really his refusal to actually criticize the movie that rubbed people the wrong way. Now, I agree, working with a major studio like Sony can't be easy. We all know what happened with Zack Snyder and Warner Brothers when filming Justice League. But this situation wasn't on the same level as that. And yes, even though big studios can suck to work with, that doesn't just mean that the director or writer or whoever behind making the movie is free of criticism. Now, I'm not out here batting for a billion-dollar company like Sony. There may have been a lot of meddling in the project. I'm not sure. I don't know. But what I do know is Chris Stuckmann didn't know either when he made this video. Mind you, this was the same weekend that this movie came out, so there wasn't any big behind-the-scenes drama or issues revealed just yet. So it just came across as someone who doesn't want to step on the toes of people that he might run into later on. This got the attention of a lot of people, and video responses and reactions were made, but Chris stayed silent about the whole situation and moved on like business like usual. But without a doubt, this video definitely hurt his credibility, and many people kind of viewed him as a bit of a shill, and just too afraid to express how he really felt. This was the biggest controversy that he was involved in since he made this shift in his channel, but there were several other smaller events that happened that didn't get nearly as much attention. But I wanted to mention them so you can see how it really affected his content.
Man, all these white people up in here.
Now, we already know that his approach to film criticism and critiques in general basically became non-existent, but it really went a step further in a few cases. Remember, he's still marking these videos as reviews, even though they're void of anything negative to say. But what made it worse is that he started doing sponsored videos. Like the review or first impressions, whatever you want to call them, were literally sponsored by or connected to the studio that made it. These videos made people have to question what he had to say even more. Here's a few notable examples. Maybe there's more, but here's what I was able to find by just looking online at discussions around the time when they released. He did a sponsored video for the TNT show The Lazarus Project. His Ghostbusters Afterlife video was sponsored by the official Ghostbusters Afterlife mobile game. Needless to say, this causes a clear conflict of interest, and to the viewer, you can't tell if he's being genuine or not because of the financial incentive. Kind of like how people are cautious of YouTubers and critics seeing a movie a couple weeks early and getting exclusive interviews and content to make with the stars and people behind the movie. You gotta take their word with a grain of salt. But the video I want to talk about specifically is his review of Argyle. Now, this plays out like a typical sort of video that he's known for at this point, where he tells you what the movie is, who's in it, and what he likes. And that's about it. Nothing really groundbreaking. But then he ends it with this.
I'm also very excited to say that I was able to interview Matthew Vaughn on my pre-production podcast. And that episode is going to go up on Friday. He was a joy and a pleasure to talk to, and I can't wait to share that with you guys.
Yeah, with that knowledge, the entire video makes more sense. If you didn't know, Argyle wasn't really that good, and Stuckmann not only didn't mention anything negative about it, but he decided to plug the interview he did with the director. This is what people speculated and feared was going to happen, and here it is right before their eyes. He's now rubbing elbows with those in Hollywood, and as such, he's not saying jack shit about the issues with their projects. This is almost on the same level as his sponsored videos, except this time it's in his personal interest instead of a financial incentive. Well, maybe it's also a bit of a financial incentive because he doesn't want to ruin his chances of working in Hollywood, so he has to keep these people happy. At this point, it was pretty clear between his Madam Web video, those sponsored videos, and his Argyle video that he's filtering his opinions. He also did a podcast interview with David F. Sandberg, and I guarantee when he goes to review one of his movies in the future, he's going to take the same approach he did with Matthew Vaughn's movie Argyle. Another example of him filtering his opinions is when he talked about Ridley Scott's Blade Runner, and to make a long video short, he explained that he rewatched it 4 or 5 times until he learned to like it. Yeah, it just seems he's too afraid to give his actual opinion on something, either as a way to not upset viewers so that they can one day check out his movies, or not to upset Hollywood filmmakers and studios. Whatever the reason, that's what was happening. But now it's time to talk about Shelby Oaks, probably the main factor for why this content change was happening.
See, I grew up in a very
In 2019, Chris Stuckmann started a series called My Filmmaking Journey. In it, he would talk about and document his journey trying to make films and such. Pretty self-explanatory. So in hindsight, he made it very clear what his ambitions and goals were. It just seems that in order to ensure that he would get there, he had to change his content. But it all paid off when he finally got the chance when he announced Shelby Oaks. So let's talk a little bit about that. As mentioned in the beginning, his debut film Shelby Oaks is coming out soon, and it had a little bit of a journey itself. It was first picked up by Paper Street Pictures in 2021, but was delayed due to a lack of funds. So Stuckmann, using his influence, put out a video announcing a Kickstarter in March of 2022, and it was very successful, raising $1.3 million, becoming the most funded horror film project in Kickstarter history. Then the cast was revealed, along with filming beginning not long after. Then throughout 2023 became the post-production era. After several delays, mostly due to the writer's strike, I believe, Shelby Oaks premiered at several different film festivals. The Fantasia International Film Festival, Fright Fest, and Fantastic Fest. Originally, it came out to some pretty mixed reviews, at least according to different websites and user reviews. Clearly, this wasn't a worldwide release, and was very small scale, but the consensus online was that the movie was alright. Not bad for a first-time filmmaker, but not many people saw it. This is where Neon comes in. Yes, the same studio behind Longlegs and The Monkey. They picked it up and are now releasing it worldwide. So yeah, that's some pretty big news for Shelby Oaks. But also at some point, Mike Flanagan got involved. Flanagan said that he's been following the project since the Kickstarter, and it reminded him a lot trying to get his first film made. Stuckmann and him eventually linked up, and through Flanagan, Stuckmann got in touch with a different editor and composer as well. The same ones Flanagan usually uses on his projects. I thought it was kind of impressive that it got the attention of Mike Flanagan and he got involved. But then I saw this interview clip of Stuckmann talking about how it happened, and it was pretty interesting.
Mike Flanagan's movie Oculus. I reviewed that, really loved it.
The tension and the suspense in this film comes from a very disturbing family situation. And that is one of the things about this movie that worked so well for me.
And he noticed and he reached out to me afterwards. It started that way, but eventually he kind of noticed that I was writing and I would talk about it in my videos that I was trying to get things made. And to his credit, he just kindly asked, "Are you working on anything right now? Is there anything I can look at?" And I shared with him some stuff and he gave me some really great notes and feedback, incredibly supportive. And from there, the relationship transformed into more of a mentor-student thing where he would give me advice and sort of point me in the right direction. And when I wrote Shelby Oaks, he read it, he was like, "This is awesome, how can I help you?"
So Flanagan has been in touch with Stuckmann since 2014, and they basically had like a mentor-student relationship, so Flanagan offered his help. If I wanted to, I could say that looking back, it makes sense now as to why he rated Flanagan's project so highly, and Flanagan was also on Stuckmann's podcast. But let's not go down that road. I'll let you come to your own conclusions on that one. Not to say that Flanagan isn't talented. Yeah, the guy's really good. Just saying, in this specific scenario, kind of makes you think a little bit. Anyway, in the midst of all this, reshoots took place in March of 2025. According to sources, these reshoots were funded by Neon once they picked it up, and apparently it was to include more, quote, blood and gore, which ended up doubling the budget. Now this new reshot and re-edited version is going to be the one releasing soon. So we'll see if those original reviews from last year still hold true. And that's where we're at now. Shelby Oaks is set to release to the masses pretty soon, and this just raises a few questions. Is this going to be his launch into the industry? Will he be the filmmaker he always wanted to be? But I also ask, was this worth steering away from YouTube and hurting his credibility? If this thing flops, then it's going to mean shifting his content for the last 5 years was mostly for nothing. And I don't mean flop in the sense of financially, because I think financially it's going to do pretty well. Even considering that working with Neon doubled the budget, the whole movie was still made for what, like $3 million? So financially, it's gonna be fine. It's more so the reception I'm curious about. If the early reviews were pretty mixed, I'm curious how it's gonna fare now once it's released to a lot more people. We'll find that out pretty soon. Now personally, here's what I think about Shelby Oaks based on the trailer. It looks alright. Nothing groundbreaking or new. Just based on the trailers, it looks pretty generic. But I imagine there's something in the actual movie that spices things up. If Chris Stuckmann wasn't attached to it, I wouldn't have much interest in it. And I think the average casual viewer who has no idea who Chris Stuckmann is probably wouldn't either. But seeing Mike Flanagan's name attached to it, along with Neon, definitely puts more eyes on the project. So just gotta wait and see how this turns out. But yeah, that's all I really have to say. It's just been an interesting journey seeing Chris Stuckmann change his content the last 4 or 5 years and just pull back a lot on criticism just to try to work his way into Hollywood. And now the time has come where he gets to release his debut film and we get to see if it was all worth it. I guess I should have clarified earlier that I don't hate Chris Stuckmann. I used to watch him back in the day. But it's just in recent years, thanks to the shift in content, I just think he's really boring and stale. And it's clear that he did this to ensure that he would get into Hollywood so he can actually make movies. And hell, I applaud him for actually chasing his dream and pursuing it. I just think it sucks that his content and credibility took a huge hit in order to achieve it. But other than that, I don't got shit else to say, so see ya.
This film is essentially
You bet your damn asses I know about I Grew Up With. I put it in all my videos now to fuck with you.
I grew up with the Charlie Brown and Snoopy show. I grew up with every single special that was ever made. Grew up.